And so I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome all our guests to the Higher Education Study Committee here in the House and the Senate. And we do have an agenda. It's a short agenda, but it has 3 healthy topics on it. And so I'd like to start out by just welcoming everybody and to go around. And I think we all have introduced ourselves. So we have Shannon Reed and Mark Rubenstein, Kathy Provencher, Nate Bowditch, right? Not Bowditch, Bowditch. Bowditch. And I think and Wayne Jones. And Maureen Mooney is a representative that's been placed on this committee. This is her first trip on the Higher Education Study Committee. Oliver Ford. And beside me, we have Senator Ruth Ward, who's chair of Senate Education, House Education, Senate, both. And Representative Mel Myler, who's been a previous chair of education, and there's Dave Luno down at the end from Hopkinton. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
We are just starting. You're welcome to sit wherever you may please.
I'll proceed.
Okay. So we're just starting out here. And we have an agenda. I'd like to ask first, is there any other item that folks on the study committee would like to discuss underneath other? If so, let's just amend it right now or accept the agenda as printed. So will do that. We'll just accept the agenda as printed. And we're going to jump right into the first item underneath our newer business here today. And I'd like to welcome Nate Bowditch to our committee. He's provost at Plymouth State University, and I had the pleasure as a trustee with the university system to listen to a presentation conducted by Nate several months ago now, and really interesting. And I think it's important that we understand what we're doing in terms of academics out in the schools, Plymouth State and Keene State College, and at UNH as well. And so Nate's been invited here today to take us through what is transpiring here at Plymouth State in terms of high impact practices. So welcome, Nate.
Thank you. Thank you. So my hope today is to sort of simplify things while giving you some insight into what we're doing. So there's a bit of jargon, but I will do my best to minimize. So I'm going to talk about high impact educational practices, which have become known as HIPS, the acronym, a bit tedious, but and a little bit of history and a background, and then I'll explain why I think they matter, and then I'll talk a bit about some of the ways that we in the USNH system engage in these high-impact educational practices. So this acronym, HIP, came into regular use about 15, 20 years ago. In 2008, a guy named George Kuhn published this book called High Impact Educational Practices, and who has access to them and why they matter. And it was the first sort of sustained look at, different kinds of teaching methodologies, focusing specifically on this set of practices, which I'll talk about. And I think it was an effort to say, okay, we know the lecture model where the professor stands in front of the classroom and he or she shares their wisdom and everyone takes notes, and then hopefully on the day of the exam, they spit it out right and get an A. That worked well for all of us, I think, but I do think we recognize, and research has shown, that there are other ways of learning that can be really valuable, and I think high-impact practices fall into that category. So there were sort of 10 high-impact practices that he identified arbitrarily, and the lists have been modified. I'm going to talk today about 6 of them, because those 6 are tied to a survey called the National Survey of Student Engagement, which over the years, millions of students have engaged in at thousands of universities. And it really is a survey about this kind of learning, high impact practice learning. So the categories that I'm going to sort of refer to, the examples of high impact practice, are things like service learning. So they ask students about how many of your courses have included community-based project or service learning, where you're getting out there and providing service to a community or a group. So that's one high-impact practice. Learning communities. Now, I don't know how familiar you are, but it's become more and more common to put groups of students together both inside and outside the classroom because we all know that a lot of learning happens outside of the classroom. So, for example, our nursing students, if they elect to, they can live on a floor of one of our dorms where all the nursing students share, live together. And we know from research that though that learning happens in that context as well as in the classroom. Another high impact practice, which you're familiar with, research with faculty. This is one of those things where one-on-one time or small group time with a faculty member focusing on serious research, the lasting impact of that is tremendous. Internships and field experience, getting out of the campus, getting off campus, getting into communities and working. That's something our students need to do. And we know that hands-on applied work is a powerful educator. Great way to learn. Another high impact practice, study abroad, getting out of your comfort zone and getting out of your country and seeing how the rest of the world works, for better and for worse. And at the presentation in April at the Board of Trustees, Provost Jones talked about study abroad. They have an extensive and diverse, really powerful study abroad programs at UNH, which they are generous enough to share with Plymouth State University students. So it's been a partnership that's been good for us. And finally, the practices that I'll talk about is a culminating senior experience. And what they mean by this is, does the seniors at your university, at the end of their experience, think about how their 4 years come together? Can they walk out of the university with a clear set of skills, a vision? Can they synthesize what they've learned in a way that makes their college experience meaningful? So those are examples of these high impact practices. Now, why do they matter? It's been, like I said, about 15, almost 20 years since this book was published. And there's 3 significant takeaways that research has shown. And again, there's tons of data on this. 3 things arise from engaging in these high impact practices. First of all, high impact practices improve retention and graduation rates. Students, research has shown again that students who participate in HIPs are more likely to persist, have higher GPAs than their peers, and graduate on time, more likely to graduate within 6 years than those students who don't, who just engage in traditional classroom learning. So that's one big advantage, retention and graduation. The second thing, and it shouldn't come as a surprise, students who engage in high impact practices have clear career advantages as they leave college. If you participate in these practices, it's a statistically significant predictor of future career and early job attainment. So, this is a transferable set of skills. You're learning how to work while you're in college, so you leave and you're ready. You don't need to, make mistakes at 3 jobs before you figure out what it means to be an adult and make a living. And I think the third significant benefit that's been documented by research, and this one is especially important for me at Plymouth State, and I think Mark's team, the preparation gaps that students come to college with. We know that students don't all come equally prepared. They don't all have the same academic background, same family structure. That's going to be very diverse preparation coming into the college environment. It makes, I know as a professor myself, you have to teach to all the students in the room. That can be immensely challenging. High impact practices close those preparation gaps because they don't rely on academic education alone. High impact practices really leverage skills that students often already have, right? Do you know how to work? Do you know how to work in teams? Do you know how to synthesize? Do you know how to figure things out with your hands maybe instead of a book? So I think it's really interesting, this idea that these kinds of courses, these kinds of practices that we build into our teaching actually serve students that come to our colleges, our campuses, less prepared. So, these have become recognized drivers of success. And so in the USNH system at all of our campuses, we've had to really ensure that our students, one, they have these experiences, and we've been all very deliberate about that. And I'll talk about some ways that we've been deliberate about that. And the second thing, as in always the case, we have to gather data and make sure that what we're doing is effective. And how can we improve it? That's a constant for us. So if you look at the second page here, And one of the interesting and important things is nice to highlight. I don't always get to highlight successes in my job, but in this case, I do. This survey, again, the National Survey of Student Engagement, 469 colleges participated last year. 1,700 have since 2000. Last year, over 250,000 students responded to the survey. Over 6.5 million have over the years. And if you look at the message, it's clear Keene State, Plymouth State, and UNH excel when it comes to this kind of teaching methodology, these high-impact practices. We're ahead of our peer institutions, New England public colleges and universities, and Carnegie class comparators. So this is a real success, and I think it's important to note we're three very different institutions in the USNH system. Who we serve, what our mission is, how we articulate, how we play to our strengths, those are very different universities. And what I find interesting is, as different as we are all strong in this really important area in our own different ways. Please.
Just adding one thing for context, those numbers, if you compare us to our peer groups, put UNH number 22 in the country of all research universities in the country, and put Keene and Plymouth both in the top quartile for their respective peer groups. So this is really a top performing area for all of our campuses across the country.
Is that for the 469 colleges that entered in the survey, or is that applicable to more than that?
It's applicable more broadly than that. The way the survey is run, not every institution does it every year, but every institution will do it over a period of 3 years. And so that integrates over the 3 years for the numbers I gave.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and then what we talked about at the board meeting, I wanted to put some meat on this to give some examples, so it's not all theoretical. So, Wayne talked about study abroad, and he had a presentation on it. And James Beebe at Keene did a presentation on student research, and because we were at Keene during the meeting, 3 students came up and talked about their work. And how they've worked with faculty members and external entities, an architect. That was an amazing presentation, to really have the intense, meaningful, and after graduation, powerful educational experience. And what I talked about, and what I will talk about today, is how we do it at Plymouth State. Our cluster model, our cluster learning model, which you probably may have heard about from President Burks, is really all about high impact practices. When Don came to Plymouth State 8 years ago now, he looked at what we were doing and said, okay, what do our students need? What do the students of North Country and New Hampshire need? And he said, we want them to graduate equipped to get out there, solve problems, and make a difference. And what do we need to do that? Well, he'd been thinking about this as a scientist, researcher, and academic, but also someone who's worked in industry. He knows how to get things done, and he knows the tools that students need. So we put together this cluster model that focuses on an applied, interdisciplinary, project-based education. And that's really what Don's vision is about. And that's one of the reasons I came to Plymouth State. It's very powerful. Students working in teams to solve real-world problems. And doing that in an environment first in the classroom, but then outside the classroom, in the community, making an impact in New Hampshire. So our whole curriculum, from the day that a student walks onto campus, they're going to take a course that fits into this high impact model. So all of our freshmen take a course called Tackling a Wicked Problem. And literally, the professor and the students, when the class starts, don't know what the problem will be. You don't get to pick the problems you have to solve in life. So one of the challenges in this course is to figure out, okay, what problem are we going to work on? And the second thing is it has to be a wicked problem, not an easy problem. All the important challenges that confront us are wicked, complicated, complex, not black or white. And so we want to have our students thinking that way as early as possible. So tackling a wicked problem is precisely that. Okay, what are we going to work on? Okay, homelessness in North Country. That's a wicked problem. There's not an easy solution to it. So the faculty and the students will come up with a project to see how they can begin addressing. They're not going to solve the problem, but start tackling it, working on it. This kind of learning happens in all majors, all programs, this high impact, engaged learning, getting out of the classroom, community learning. As a senior, again, one of those 6 High Impact Practices is a capstone, a senior experience that integrates. All of our seniors take what we call an INCAP, surprise, surprise, integrated capstone, to make sure that they have a sense of the breadth and the connections in their education through their 4 years. So another way that we do was we do these cluster projects, they're called, and it's one of the most powerful examples, and I think this is maybe why Representative Ladd found this a compelling story. Back in Durham, and when was it when I did the presentation on the Gorham project, or my students did, I didn't?
Was that the fall, October?
Yeah, October. So we had a bunch of students working with one of our business professors, Chantal Forge, and she knew that she heard of this, the Gorham paper mill up outside of Berlin had been purchased by a wealthy New Yorker, Manhattanite, who was trying to figure out what to do with it. Producing a little bit of paper, but basically this huge plot of land, not really put to good use, didn't know what to do with it. Our students went up there as a group, as a consulting team, and worked with town citizens, business people, surveyed the community, worked with this owner from New York to come up with 4 different business models of how you could leverage that space, that land. So, having to do with a farm to table possibility, or an outdoor adventure space, or something. I think the farm to table had a bee feature. So bunches of a manufacturing plan, which I think is ultimately what the owner went with, working with a Canadian company. So this is a prime example of our students being sent out into the real world to solve a problem that does not have a predetermined answer. What I've put in front of you, this is another version instead of the Gorham Paper Mill project, which I'm happy to share you their 100 and something page consulting report if you're interested, that they provided the owner. But what I have today, pardon me, if you go to the Plymouth Creative, PSU student-run marketing design agency, this is this is a course. Students get credit for this, and it's a course run by 2 business professors and an art professor who specializes in graphic design. And essentially what the course is a marketing and advertising and design agency called Plymouth Creative. And this has been going now for a couple of years, and it's had a tremendous impact. These professors, they get out there in the community, they do various kinds of work. It's completely experiential, it's engaged with the community. So if you go to the next page, you see about 15 to 25 students a semester. And if you scroll through to this funny looking page, to the services offered, you can see what they offer to local business people as their service. So you want to do graphic design work or social media work. We have one of the partners in town, Peppercorn Market, which I'm a big fan of on Main Street there. They were inept at social media. So they really needed our students to do, among other things, a social media campaign for them, which is now excellent. Web development, market research. So again, for the Gorham Paper Mill project, the students surveyed the community and figured out, what do people want? How can we use this piece of land? Event planning and branding and campaign development. So they've worked now with, there's a full list of partners here, but it's very impressive. Gunstock Ski Resort, Owl's Nest, Waterville Valley. We have a car for the New Hampshire Electric Co-op that drives around campus, a plug-in car that's wrapped in a design done by these students. Local charity, Franconia Inn, and then again, my favorite, this Peppercorn Market, which they've done tremendous work with. They completely closed this market down, rebuilt it, rebranded it, found extra funding, in fact, which surprised me. I didn't know they'd been involved in that. And they reopened about a month ago. They had a grand reopening, and they've been knocking it out of the park with the help of our students. They've done a great job. So if you look at the testimonials, we have a full list of partners here. This is an amazing thing. This is a free service that we provide to people who might not have the resources, like Peppercorn Market. They don't have the money to go hire a Tony firm to help them with their marketing campaign. Our students have done tremendous work for them, and they've seen real value and return on this. And of course, if you go to the next page of testimonials, it's our students. They're working. They're out there in the world making a difference, figuring out how to leverage their education. And then the last 2 pages, there's a full list of our community partners, which will continue to grow. And it's really rewarding watching these students do this and the impact on our local businesses. They're working with Tenny Mountain, with ambitious expansion efforts with a mass investor. So there's tons of opportunity, and I just really admire. And then I had my faculty colleagues, Pam Anniser, Denise Hutchins, and George Botinico, I wanted to celebrate their creativity and entrepreneurship. So this was just a quick snapshot of what you're doing. These high impact practices are not new to any of us at any of our institutions. We've served our communities, the North Country, New Hampshire, at PSU. We've been doing this for 150 years. Ut prosim, that I may serve. That's our motto. And that's one of the cores of this sort of educational philosophy. And the cluster learning model and these high impact practices are a way of moving that vision forward. So I've overstayed my welcome, talked too much. I will be quiet now. But I think it's important that you see how we're thinking, how we're collaborating, working to serve our students and what they need, and ultimately our communities in the state of New Hampshire. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Nate. That's a wonderful overview of the program. And I just recall when the trustees were provided this information, we talked about how a logo can really impact the university system. And I'm sure, Wayne, that UNH went through a lot of this when developing the new logo you have here now, or I hope they did. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to open this up to questions from the committee at this time. If folks have questions to ask of Nate, Senator.
Oh, thank you. My son is a graduate of Plymouth State University, and I think he gave it the basic 5 because his parents were paying the bills. But he's done very well. I like a couple of things that you're doing. I did meet with the president on a couple of occasions. Actually, I saw him down here in Concord a couple of weeks ago, and I enjoy his vision. I think he is a visionary. It's certainly out of the ordinary of what I would call the classic academic college president. There are 2 things that impress me that I think will serve the university well as you move forward. The service experience, the faculty instruction, the integration with the faculty. I've been a faculty member at St. Anselm's for a long time. I've been in post-secondary education for most of my adult life. But I think the fact that there's an integration situation with the faculty gives the student a much better opportunity to not only learn, but to progress. And without that, I think we're losing something. So I'm very interested in that. The wrap-up course. When I was at UNH, we had LA 51, which was just like what you're articulating. It was a course that brought music, brought art, brought the community, brought everything together, and I was really excited by the course. The problem is it only lasted 1 semester. I mean, those things should last throughout your entire college experience. I would like to see what your attrition rate is based on this formula, and what it was prior, what it is now. Because getting a student is difficult. I was director of admissions at one time at Southern New Hampshire University. Getting him is one thing, retaining him is something else. If all of these things are in play, you should have a better success rate in terms of retaining kids. And if you're retaining kids, their desire to stay here is probably intensified, because we want them to stay in New Hampshire. I'd really like to see some data on the results of this. Now, he's been there 8 years.
Yeah.
8 years now.
Yes.
So he's probably had 1 real graduating class, because it takes 6 years, right? So he's had 1 graduating class. What's the attrition rate? what's the success, the preliminary success rate in terms of their ability to get a job opportunity, but secondarily, did they stay here in New Hampshire? Was there enough done in terms of helping them to get a good situation in New Hampshire and retaining them in New Hampshire? That's a problem that we have witnessed, or I've witnessed over the years. I think you, Representative Ladd, has witnessed that too. We see an outward migration rate of young kids, but with these in place, they should make a significant impact on our ability to retain students, and the exciting things that are being created. And I don't want to go on because others want to speak, but the exciting situation that's being created in Manchester with Dean Kamen. I do a few things with Dean Kamen, but that opportunity in the real world to do really good things should, right across the board, these kinds of things remaining in New Hampshire or being created, retaining, not only being retained here, but expanding here, should create opportunity.
So 2 quick responses. I don't want to monopolize, but we both said simultaneously the data speaks for itself. So we know, not just here, I mean, again, there's national data on this, that students that engage in these practices. But you are right to say, well, show me at Plymouth State that that's the case. And we can. One of the challenges for President Birx, having said that, is this little thing happened a few years into his time, right? And so the data's been affected by that. But we know that, even having said that we're up by about almost 10% from when he arrived. Our retention rate has improved, closing in on 70%, which compared to our comparators is quite high. Obviously it's not an R1 university, it's not an Ivy, so that's not a relevant comparison. But to our comparators, we've improved by almost 10%, which is significant. Your second point about keeping our students where they belong. Well, this semester, 43% of our incoming class are first generation students from New Hampshire. That's a significant impact. Those are students, we're making a difference. We are the opportunity for them. And one of the reasons we're so committed to this kind of work, getting students out of the classroom into the community, is so that they're connected, so that they have those connections. So I just shook hands like you did at commencement with kids who I've met who've engaged in these things. Gorham Paper Mill, they're going back to their communities. Who did they thank? They thanked Plymouth State and their parents and the White Mountains, who inspire me every day to serve the state of New Hampshire. I mean, I had a student say that to me. So I do think tracking the data on employment is something we also work on, so we can report on that as well.
If I could just add one additional data point for you, at UNH, we pay very close attention to if a student does an internship or a community engagement exercise like this, and they come from out of state, they are twice as likely to stay in the state and work in the state. 60% of the students that do an internship or a community service project in the state, when they graduate, stay in the state.
Cost additional tuition money on the part of the student, or how are they paid for?
No, the students never pay more. Our students can't, and we don't want them to. This is supposed to be value added for everyone involved. So we go out of our way institutionally. We have to expend labor and make the connections and make sure that all the legal bases are covered, risk management issues are dealt with, right? If we're sending our students out, we have to be responsible to those things. So it's not a free by any means, but it's worth it to us and to our students, the value added.
Just to put a few more numbers on it, the biggest investment we make is actually creating the structures that bring us one-stop shop for companies to come to us and for communities to come to us with these challenges. So at UNH, we have 2,700 New Hampshire companies that are working with our Career and Professional Success Office. Many of them it's paid, many of them it's not. It's a mix of whether they pay the student or not, and we navigate that space. The key is to give them a one-stop shop. I need help. I would like to engage with students. Can you put me in touch with the right department, with the right faculty member, with the right program? And that's where we make our investment.
Yeah.
Actually, Senator DeLisandro asked my question I was going to have, but you've just prompted another one. With the success that you've had of having students stay in the state, I would suggest that you meet with our budget committee and bring those stories to the budget committee. Because particularly as you begin to look at the whole issue of the workforce development within the state.
Kathy, can you respond to that?
Thank you for the question. And actually, our budget request was specifically targeted for Plymouth and Keene to stand up more opportunities for internship and community engagement. UNH invested its own dollars half a dozen years ago and has built the infrastructure. They have more internship opportunities at UNH than they have students that will or can take them. But it takes investment for Plymouth and Keene to stand up that engine, if you will, and to work with business partners, right? There has to be an infrastructure there. So that was a big part of our budget request.
This is the follow-up. It would seem to me that if you have, I'm not sure whether you had any students come before the budget committee to talk about their experience, because I think that's important, as well as the businesses that they've been working with. So that our legislature here begins to understand, not just from a theoretical standpoint or an esoteric standpoint, but a practical standpoint of how these HIP programs are in fact engaging students and then staying in the state, because that's obviously, as we know, it's a huge issue here. And we need to understand that from a legislative standpoint of what the return on investment is as we begin to deal with these programs.
We have a wicked going with in the legislature right now, workforce housing. How is that wicked program impacting these students which are coming out of UNH, Plymouth State, Keene State, and the community college system in terms of finding housing?
It's huge everywhere. I mean, I think it's interesting. So yes, it's a big problem. We know that and I think one of the interesting things is the different ways that within the system we're trying to address it, or to support and address it. So what you were saying?
Yeah, it's also a challenge. It's an enormous challenge. It's an enormous challenge for current students that want to do an internship with a company in the North Country and can't because they don't have a place to stay, or they're trying to do something in Manchester. They prefer to live in Manchester while they're finishing their degree in Durham. The other place where we have an enormous challenge is recruiting students in at the graduate level. These are professional masters, MBA, masters in healthcare. Those students want to come to the state. They want to get this higher education. But when they come, they can't afford to live here, certainly within some of those regions. So the same thing that our companies are seeing, the universities are seeing as well, and we're trying to find new ways to address it.
And I would say it's heightened where we are in Plymouth, and not that it's not difficult I've had tremendous difficulty recruiting faculty and staff. Again, the students have their own set of issues with that, but my ability to bring top quality people to Plymouth State when I have such limited housing opportunities for them that are affordable and accessible and close to campus, that's been a huge challenge for us.
At Plymouth State,
some partnership with the community college system. We have a new robotics program that was one of the visions of President Burks, and I've just hired a new leader of the program. He's joining us. He's trying to find a place to live, one of his challenges. But the robotics program is a perfect example of, again, Don's vision of, we don't want straightforward one program departments. That's not how we work. We don't have departments, but we have these clusters. And the robotics program integrates game design, manufacturing and robotics, computer science, graphic, all the other elements that go into. We also have a game design program which integrates computer science and robotics and storytelling, right? So these kinds of programs, they're tremendously powerful, and we know that it's part. So we're building programs to address those things. What's interesting about it is that the way that AI, computer science, data analytics, and robotics, there's a whole spectrum where those need to be leveraged and applied. So the work you're doing in the community college system is incredibly important. We need people who can go in and do what needs to be done at a very applied level on, in manufacturing systems, for example. That's essential. And then, okay, so what's the next step? What about programming in a manufacturing facility? What about building robots? What about designing? What about the programming that goes behind that work? And that scales up. So I think there's a role for the community colleges, places like Plymouth State, and then R1 universities, they're doing the cutting edge. So I think there's multiple answers to the question that you ask, and the answers are going to come from all of us in different ways.
So, and a follow-up on that, Rick, and thanks for talking about this, Nate. It reminds me of a conversation I had with Mark a couple of years ago too, when I think we were over on the NHCI campus, and you said, "What can our students be doing to help you in the legislature?" So some of the wicked problems that we confront here, obviously policy related.
Yep.
And we're using decades old tools to try to solve those, like Excel spreadsheets and things like that, to try to model what this means. And an example that I think several of us here are probably familiar with is school funding. And Rick, you and I spent a ton of really good, valuable time, but we're basically using linear models on what does this mean for districts and the number of English language learners or free and reduced price lunch kids and stuff like that. But there's so many other factors that come into play now too, and I think this is one of the things Mark and I talked about. I mean, school funding policy translates right down into tax policy. And I know that can be a bad word around here, but that's state funding. So what does that mean for homeowners that own property less than $500,000, or homeowners that own property more than $2 million, or homeowners that own property, manufactured housing, right, or living in apartments? And we have that data now. It's a massive data set. Yep. But I think it's probably beyond the capacity of Rick and I to model the effects on that, and probably would be asking too much of the budget office to
Absolutely. We worked on it together, and there's a lot to do.
right.
Machine learning.
And are some of these things, which, and I think in the state of New Hampshire, public school funding has been the wicked problem that we have not been able to solve, and part of that is will to solve it, but part of it is how to solve it. And I think this is an area where clearly as people who live here in New Hampshire, we're all interested. People who have had kids grow up in New Hampshire, we're all interested. And then obviously from a business side, the community colleges and the university system certainly have an interest in kids succeeding in K-12. And making sure that the 13,000 kids in Manchester are having the same opportunities of success as the 1,000 kids in Hopkinton. I mean, you know, I usually when Patty Cornell is around the table here, she knows that I always use Manchester. Sometimes she winces a little bit. But you know, New Hampshire has more homeless kids than Hopkinton has kids in the K-12 system. So, you know, how do you solve that wicked problem? And to make sure that these kids have the same opportunities as the other students in Manchester and the other students in Hanover and Hopkinton. And when I'm talking about opportunities too, I'm talking about opportunities for success. So the average student in Manchester performs at the 4th percentile statewide. So 96% of students in New Hampshire perform better than the average student in Manchester. So, you know, that's an opportunity, not just for the kids to, I mean, you know, a 4th percentile outcome isn't a great, you know, isn't a strong outcome. But even though we have, you know, strong outcomes statewide in New Hampshire, but you know, what does this mean for our economy? What does this mean for the this type of learning model? If we can, you know, move the needle in some of these places by solving that wicked problem, then it starts to help solve a lot of other wicked problems.
A huge one there, Representative Luna. But, you know, there is another wicked problem that I heard the senator to my left speak to at the Finance Committee the other day, and that's civics education, K through 12. And I don't know where the Senate is on that right now, Lou, whether you've dropped it from $2 to $1 million, but it's a wicked problem that needs resolution. Whether we're going to come up with what I think the senator wants to see as a textbook, and this representative wants to see the same thing. We're kind of old-fashioned, but there needs to be something in front of the student. But how could we utilize these programs that you have that you're talking about, and rather than our having to contract some service out to somebody out in Arizona to write our civics program, could we not be using what we have on board within various departments as part of this wicked problem, HIP type programming to get to that endpoint we want with the means that we have to pay for it. You might want to talk more about that, Lou, but I think we have to really talk about how we're going to develop this civics K through 12 program
Right.
that we drastically need in the state of New Hampshire.
Well, there's certainly no question that we share the same view. K through 12 is where the action should be. But let me refer, Representative Luna talked about Manchester. I served on the Manchester School Board for 10 years. I chaired the Finance Committee on the Manchester School Board, and I have a district where I have 8 minority schools. 8 minority schools. So I guess in the rest of the state, they probably had 8 minority schools in one district. What does that mean? That means blacks and Hispanics represent more than 50% of the enrollment in the schools in my district. That's a challenge both for the district and for what's beyond the district. I was looking at truancy rates yesterday, and I was looking at attendance rates. We have the oldest public high school in the state of New Hampshire, Manchester High School Central. The attendance rate, 78%. 78%. Graduation rate at Manchester High School West, which has 737 students. My children all went to West. My wife went to West. My kids went through the Manchester system, K through 12. Has a graduation rate of 60%. 60%. The highest graduation rate in the city is at Memorial. I think it's 80%, a little bit higher than 80%. So we're talking about the things that are happening at the post-secondary level. You're right. What about K through 12? And I've been around here for a long time. I was on the committee of conference on the first education funding piece of legislation in 1999 when Jeannie Shaheen was governor. If we don't address that situation, where are the youngsters that we're hoping on our future? Where are they going to go? And how are they going to get there? How are they going to get there? That's my concern. And civics, I taught civics. I say this all the time. One of my civics students was the Secretary of State, longest serving Secretary of State in the United States. I had him in the 9th grade. I had the Speaker of the House in the 9th grade. I had Alex Ray in the 9th grade. Pretty successful people. All right, when you think of it. I was teaching civics in those days. And it meant something because of the involvement of these people. And I think that's where we have to get a grasp of that. I know how important it is. We had a chance a number of years ago, I would say probably in 1978, 1980, when Augenblick delivered a formula. That formula would have solved that problem. It would have solved that problem. It was vetoed by the governor. It was vetoed by the governor. And as a result of that, we've gone this way with education ever since. We're in court right now. We may lose that suit. I think it's more likely to lose it than not. But what's going to happen if you lose it? They turn it back to the legislature. So here we are. I like what's happening at the post-secondary level, but the base is really where it's at. The base is those K through 12 kids. How do we face up to that? And how does the post-secondary play a role in helping us? At the Parker Verde School, we used to have Keene State students come and do their practicum at Parker Verde. I don't know if we'd have that anymore, but we need that kind of help. We need that kind of integration and help. What better social experience is there than to come to a place like Manchester, which is Manchester is an urban center. It's not the old Manchester that I came to, 50 something years ago when I was teaching high school at Bishop Bradley High School. It's a different world now. We have social workers in all of our grammar schools. Social workers. I mean, these are the needs that are being manifested, and extend that to the post-secondary level. Where are these kids going to end up? They're not going to Plymouth, Keene, UNH. They're not going to the community college. I don't know where they're going, but they're certainly not being prepared properly to go anyplace, and that's dangerous. And that's what we face with all the glaring opportunities that are available. I talk about Cayman. Cayman tells me he needs 4,000 workers. He could hire 4,000 people. He needs 200 engineers, graduate engineers. University of New Hampshire, our engineering school, one of the best in the country. Are those engineers gravitating, towards Manchester? The other problem is this. But I think K through 12, and I know the gentlemen on this stage have spent a lifetime working on it. Well, I've spent a lifetime working on it. I've been involved in it, teaching in it. I still live in the same house 51 years later. All right? Bought it for a very meager existence. I tell people my mortgage was $148 a month and I had trouble making it. Because I was working in a school and I was getting $5,000 a year as my salary. So the problem that faces us, and I looked at the numbers, 30,000 free breakfasts in Manchester, 30,000 free breakfasts, 70,000 free and reduced price lunches. Does that tell you how poor the city is when you have that kind of a situation? 78% attendance rate, highest attendance rates in the quality areas of Manchester. So we got to start there. We've got to start there, and that's a whole mental situation that's got to change. We we gotta excite people about how meaningful it is. How meaningful it is and how important it is. And, I think, as I say, it starts K through 12 and then it goes on. And we can do a lot at the post-secondary level. I think a lot has been done. But indeed, the corpus keeps shrinking. You get fewer graduates, fewer numbers. I think the kids that you're getting, if there are kids, need more help. They just need more help. So anyway,
Maybe,
I'll talk too much.
Senator, we can have a response from the universities, but I'd also like to hear, maybe some input on where the senator is coming from in terms of the community college system. So Wayne, why don't you go first and then the chancellor?
Sure, happy to. So first of all, I think a key aspect of all of this is the partnership and how are we working together. I'm delighted that, we are in your schools. You have teachers from Keene and Plymouth and UNH in Manchester schools. Literally, the president and I and our team was over at one of the minority serving schools on the east side. I don't remember the name of the school off the top of my head last week as part of our Embrace New Hampshire tour. In general, and I'll go back to Representative Luno's comment earlier, just like we have a mechanism in place where companies can come to us and say, we have a wicked problem. Do you have a student, a team that could work on this, whether that be marketing or analytics or AI? That exists for communities as well. And we do work with communities on everything from marketing to how do they implement new strategies. Some of those are very successful. For example, in Manchester, we just got a major NSF award, several $1 million, to work on how do you elevate inner city schools and how do you create new partnerships that link to social work programs as well as all those other things that you need. I think we have to see this more as a partnership, and we'd love to hear, where would a team of students doing a capstone project, or where would a graduate student and a faculty member working with a couple of others be able to provide new insights that would be helpful from data analytics or other. So when you hear about those things, we're very interested. We're doing many of them, but we could do more. And so I would say if you hear about them, please ask. And that includes K-12. I mean, we have certified teacher programs at Keene and Plymouth that have the expertise to build K-12 curricula. And we should be taking advantage of that.
Yeah, and we do everything we can. We work up in the North Country and different areas where we're finding partnerships and communities in need. But yeah, there's tons of need and more than we can serve. So we need to know, we're trying to develop capacity we're meeting tomorrow. We have a 6-hour provost retreat tomorrow. And one of our central focuses is education. So this is top on our radar. Sorry.
And Senator, it was Gosler Park. That was where we went. Gosler Park was where we went.
Oldest grammar school in the city. It's a dump, as you can see.
But with some great leadership and a number of UNH alumni that were there working, and we had our faculty there. It was a great discussion.
It's an antiquated building. Just the physical property is. I visit every school in my district every year, and Gosler Park, as I said, oldest grammar school in the city, and the administrator does a very good job. She's committed. It's amazing. Yes, it is amazing, given the task at hand.
And the amazing thing is these schools which we give that terminology to dump, we have one in Woodsville as well, and the teachers and the staff really oftentimes take offense with that due to the fact that they're really doing a great job with the facilities that they have and mastering how to work in that. But you're absolutely correct. Those places are not fit to be teaching in today. Chancellor, can you add something from the community college perspective in regard to where we're going with this conversation? This is an important conversation.
Well, I'll try. I'm reluctant to ever disagree with Senator D'Alessandro, but I'm going to take a moment. When you say it starts with K through 12, and I would offer that it actually starts with early childhood before we get to K. And I think that's one of the objectives that we're trying to meet, provide more capacity for high quality early childhood education and childcare, which is another catalyst like workforce housing, that if we can break that logjam, if we can create that capacity, and not simply capacity for where children can be while their parents are working, but real foundational education that starts them off on better footing. That's part of the solution. I've been in with the legislature a number of times where I've referenced the free and reduced lunch data. I come back to the point that not only is it still more than 1 in 5 students across New Hampshire, more than 40% in Manchester, but it's not just a reflection of the students, it's a reflection of the parents of this generation of school-age children and their circumstances in this economy and this labor market. So can we be doing more simultaneously for that generation of working adults to give them on-ramps into the workforce at levels that will be more consistent with what the future of the state's calling for? The other point that I'd like to reference, and it ties the two pieces of this conversation together, we started a discussion about high impact practices in post-secondary. Going back to the need for better civic education, maybe the best civic education is high impact, finding ways to actually engage students. If there's a state in this country that can actually demonstrate what a citizen is responsible for, what being part of a community means, it's New Hampshire. And I'm wondering if there's not a way that we can develop not just textbooks, but learning experiences that really engage students. Otherwise, to find people who are willing to sit in these chairs over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years is going to be harder. But for them to understand why you do what you do and what it means to this state, I think there's a real opportunity. So I think this conversation that we started with high impact practices ought to be tied back to the civic education conversation for K through 12.
Thank you. We have several items on the docket here for today, and maybe we ought to take a break here. This is a topic which, that I'm glad we had the discussion. We can't just drop it. But we have a number 4 on our doc here, Dr. Wayne Jones, from the university system, University of New Hampshire, talking about alternative pathways to the bachelor's degree. And it's just not the bachelor's degree. One of the issues which we're dealing with is trying to ensure that more students are coming out of K through 12 with industry recognized credentials. And that's that basic hard skill that's going to get them that and conform with what industry is requesting as being that standard. And I'm curious to know, Wayne, is that something too that's being emphasized at your level as well? I know that we have it going on our CTE centers and in conjunction with the community college system, but I'm curious to know what we're doing with that. But I also gave you that article to try to respond to. So why don't you go ahead with your presentation and we won't throw more at you.
More questions are always welcome. And I appreciated sending the articles that you did, Representative, does college take 4 years? Is a college degree worth it? Do we need general education? These are actually higher ed challenges that are being discussed nationwide right now. In fact, literally, I almost grabbed it, but it didn't fit in my briefcase conveniently. The Chronicle of Higher Education came out this month, and the cover is about, is general education really worth it or is it broken? I think to provide a little bit of background and context first, and then I'm going to address those questions and, of course, any other questions you want. Let's just take a step back and look at the history of higher education that puts us where we are today. Higher education as it looks today has its basis back in the 1700s, and even as late as the 1900s to 1950, it looked very similar. The difference was it was really targeted at elite institutions. It was targeted at the elite. The belief was that only about 10% of students would get a college degree. That changed after World War II, and the GI Bill, massification of higher education, universities grew up all over the place. Small colleges became parts of state systems. We went big. In the 60s, it shifted again, and the shift in the 60s was away from what was seen as providing that elite education for everyone to professionalizing. How do we make sure that we have professional schools, professional engineering degrees, got new levels of growth, healthcare degrees, education, schools of education, all that professionalization came in. If you fast forward a little bit, you move to into the 90s and into 2000, 2010. What you see is now everybody wants the degree. You go from 20% of students applying for a college degree to 50, 60%. And as a result, you get new players in the market. You get privates, online coming in. After 2015 and now after the pandemic, it looks much different. It looks different for a couple of reasons. One, declining high school graduation rates, particularly in the Northeast. More importantly, culturally, students are saying, hey, I can do things differently. In a recent poll that was quoted in this article, it talked about how only 41% of high school seniors said it was very likely that they were going to go to college. 60% of those students said that their most likely path was to start their own business and become an entrepreneur. 50% said they were going to become social influencers. I'm not commenting on those, but the point is the culture has shifted in what the students think they want. We're also at a time where many fewer students are going right into college. They're taking gap years, funded by their parents in some cases. Senator commented jokingly on that earlier. It's a different environment. In that space, we also have the challenge that employment has gone from, in the 70s, in 2007, 2008, unemployment was high. Many places, states turned down requirements for bachelor's degrees because they needed to thin out their pools because everybody was applying for these jobs. Now they're going the other way. Now they're turning them off. Unemployment is too low. Maybe we don't need a bachelor's degree for you to be able to work in the motor pool or for you to be able to work in other aspects. Universities today are trying to adapt to that environment. At the core of that, I think, is what I'll call integration for life. There's a recognition that universities don't just provide content for 18 to 24-year-olds in that period right after high school. In fact, we should be providing support for individuals throughout their lives, and we should be providing the content and that expertise in a manner that is flexible. I would say there's 4 key aspects of what higher education is trying to drive today, and I'm proud to say that all of the campuses in USNH and our partners in the community college system are doing the same thing. We're trying to create more flexible degree pathways. Do you need a 4-year degree? No, you can get your degree in 3 years. 6% of students last year at UNH graduated in 3 years. 15% of students could have, chose not to. They chose to finish and to get more credits than they needed. They need 120 credits to graduate. The average at UNH is like 138. We're not requiring it, they're choosing it because they want to do double majors and triple majors. Partnerships with employers is absolutely key. All disciplines in the university system go through disciplinary accreditation, which is highly rigorous. Every 5 years, we get reviewed by our peers across the country saying, are we teaching the right things? Are they lining up with what is needed nationally? That's not enough because employers have specific needs and different aspects. They've emphasized soft skills much more. The work in high impact learning that my colleague just spoke about is absolutely critical to that. They're working in teams, they're working on interdisciplinary problems. It's not just about being an engineer. You have to know how to work with the business professional, with the marketing and design person and the communications person to solve a problem. They're much more interdisciplinary. Interdisciplinary education is where it's at. You see that we have many more students. It was amazing at commencement 2 weeks ago to listen to all the students walking across with double major this and double major that. At UNH, we just shifted our graduation. Instead of doing the monster ceremony in the football stadium, which many of you have been to, we now do it by college, a more intimate environment. And yet many of the students said, well, I'm getting a degree from Paul College for Business and the College of Liberal Arts. Can I go twice? Do I have to go twice? That interdisciplinarity also shows up in they want to provide different ways of representing the skills they've learned. They want to be an engineer, but they want to have a language as well. Or they want to get their degree in business, but they'd like to have music as part of their degree. And now the university is challenged with how do we curate that? How do we help the students recognize that there's connections, maybe let them develop those connections, and then curate that. A couple of ways of doing that. Obviously, the registrars are all over that. But micro credentials, micro certifications are something that about 5 years ago, the system embraced aggressively. And Ken Navali, who leads our extension program in every corner of the state, now has literally 100 different micro credential programs that students can take, but anyone in the state could take. You don't have to get a degree. You can take a certificate or a weekend workshop, or put together 2 courses to make your own micro-credential that demonstrates a certain skill set. That's where higher education is going today. Those are the types of things that we're working through. And we're certainly not doing it in a vacuum, because even in addition to our own accreditation that we go through with our peers, companies are a key part of that. Every college at UNH, as well as my colleagues at Keene and Plymouth, have industrial advisory boards that are part of that leadership team that meet with the dean, meet with the department chair, saying, do we have the right skills? Has it changed in 5 years? How did the pandemic change it? So those are the conversations we're actively having. Those were touched on in these articles very, very appropriately. I would say, there's lots and lots of evidence that employers are struggling as well, not just because of the demand and the low unemployment rate, but also because today's students have taken what happened naturally and culturally, where you got a job I remember I got an internship at IBM when I was an undergraduate. And I was told, oh, you're set. You're going to work for them for 40 years. Well, that culture shifted, but students today are taking it further. Employers today report back that they're seeing that students want to take their first job and only stay there for a year or two, and then take a jump, and maybe take a 6-month gap between jobs before they go to the next job. That's one of the reasons we see some employers creating their own training programs. Because if you go work for Google and they train you on whatever their software or their process is, you can't then leave them and necessarily translate that directly to another job. We've had students, I won't name the student or the company, but I will tell you of a graduate student at UNH. When I got there, this student had been on the books for 12 years to get their degree. What the heck are they doing? I dug into it, right? Because I want to get our time to degree as short as possible. The story was the individual was getting a master's degree, had an opportunity to do an internship in their last semester, went to the company to do the internship, and never came back to finish their degree. All they had to do was write like 50 more pages and defend their thesis, and they would get their degree, and they weren't coming back for 12 years. And I'm like, well, let's just go talk to their manager. Their manager must want them to get their degree. They'd been promoting them. They'd been giving them big raises. And the response from the manager was, if he gets his degree, he'll probably leave. I don't want him to get his degree. I want to keep him too busy. And I think that's the mindset that we're in. That's what we're trying to deal with and be flexible with as we respond to the market. I think I'll stop my comments there and dig into whatever aspect of that you would most like to speak to.
There's so much to that. Representative Myler.
Yes, what role do students play in the development of your programs?
Students play an active role in many of the programs, usually through advisory boards. Every college has a student advisory board that works with it, and many departments do as well. I would say that we also find more students participating in the co-curricular activities. So the high impact practices, every one of our universities have both first year and capstone programs. So for example, if you go to UNH and you go into the engineering school, we have the Innovation Scholars Program. This is a program designed for students. Day one, first day as a freshman, you can get involved in a research project, and you help to set what that project's going to be. Our honors students do the same thing. They have a community service project. We don't tell them what they're going to work on. They tell us what they want to work on. They learn what skills they need, and it's our job to try and help find that skill set to give them support, whether that be having an entrepreneur in residence that comes in from the community or finding the right types of training that the students need. So they're pretty actively involved, and they're constantly pushing us.
Yeah, I would just to add to that, it's right. There's 2 ways. I mean, obviously students, they vote with their feet. So they tell us, right? That's one of the clearest ways. We have to be creative. We have to take risks. We have to see what the market needs, what New Hampshire needs, what trends are. We need to be smart about what we do, but then we have to listen to students. we're also doing student-centered learning in everything we do. So again, at a very large scale, thinking of the programs we run, but also how we teach and what we do. We try and we encourage our colleagues to be constantly looking at what do students respond to? What were the outcomes? Was it an effective approach to that? If not, change it. And I think that kind of, it's constant innovation. There's an element of risk. We're going to try stuff and see if it works, but that's the only way we're going to make progress.
Is there a downside to the university system in terms of your revenues when we, for example, a career technical education centers where the directors are looking for skill in this technology area and soft skills too in terms of how to relate and communicate those content areas that person possesses, not necessarily looking at a bachelor's degree. So when we're going in that trend, possibly, and probably real-wise, how's that going to impact the university system? Are you going to have to change you're going to have this 120 hours?
So the 120 hours for the degree is not set by us. It's set by the Department of Education federally, and that goes through our accreditor. That being said, between AP programs and others in high schools, the First Start program that runs through the community college, many students that come to us already have, 20, 30 credits before they even arrive on campus. So that's why it's relatively easy for students to graduate in 3 years. They're just not choosing to do that. I think the more exciting piece is thinking about how are students navigating the micro-credentialing space and that skill space. I really appreciate the CTC. So in the fall, I went up and visited the CTC at White Mountains High School. I did not remember the exact name, White Mountain High School. And they have a wonderful manufacturing program. And their students are coming out with skills that can directly take them into a manufacturing job, or with a little more training at the community college can take them into that technical path. But it also puts them on a road that could take them into an engineering path. We have a gap between those two. And so is it a revenue challenge for us? No, I think it's a revenue opportunity. We should have our faculty and the community college faculty talking to the CTCs about, you don't have to get a college degree. You can go that other path, but you can if you want. These are options. This is part of that flexibility that students are looking for today. And if they know about it in high school, then they can choose. Maybe they choose to get a job right out of high school for a gap year, and then they go to the community college and get a couple of years under their belt there while they're working, and maybe get an associate's degree and know that, a year later they could come back and do a 2-year degree and finish up a bachelor's degree at Plymouth. Those are the conversations we have to have more of, but we can't afford to stay in our silos where the CTC faculty don't talk to the community college faculty and the community college faculty don't talk to the university faculty. We have to build that bridge to make it work.
Representative Mooney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. As I mentioned earlier, my niece is a proud graduate of Plymouth State University, and her brother went to UNH Manchester, so great to see you all here. My question is this. I know in the beginning stages of college and the end of high school, there are merge years, for example, running START and the like. Is there anything similar to that on the other end? For example, you said somebody could have finished up in 3 years, decided to stay 4, but could they somehow merge their 3rd and a half or 4th year with their 1st year of a graduate program and go it that way? And if so, is that beneficial to you and how? Thank you.
Answer for both of us on that.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%.
4-1 programs, 3-2 programs, the idea that you can do your bachelor's degree and your master's degree at the same time is absolutely in play across higher education, including all of our campuses.
Yep.
Even more importantly, I think it's another opportunity for us to be able to build new bridges, because we have students that want to go to Keene because they want to study maybe they want to study social work at Keene as an undergraduate, but they want to get their master's degree at UNH at the same time. I was trying to think of a degree program that was unique to the two, but it turns out that they can do right now. We haven't emphasized it, and we haven't done the hard work, which we're trying to do now through the retreat we're doing tomorrow, through the meetings we're doing with the community colleges, to try and create more of those opportunities and make them more public to the students so that they know about them. That's something we have to do better.
Yeah, we do it on our campuses.
Yeah.
Well, and we've been doing it for a long time. It's value added for the students. You save at least a semester and sometimes even a year's tuition. And because some of the credits overlap for the 2 degrees. So it's a great value proposition. But right now it's again too insular. So we are again trying to figure out as many ways as we can to give movement across our institutions that close these gaps.
Representative Myler. Oh, you see, why, Mark, do you want? Okay.
I was going to ask Mark the question of how many of your students currently are in the program where they matriculate automatically into one of the schools? What percent?
That's sort of getting into our discussion, which is the next bullet, where we're looking at the associates leading into the bachelors and, but yes, why don't you, that's a good transition question.
Would you turn on the mic, please?
Sorry.
Thank you.
In a typical recent year, somewhere between 600 and 700 students will transfer from the community college system to the university system.
And do they, at the time that they start their, excuse me if I may,
Yes, go ahead.
at the time that they start their program as a, I say, a freshman, do they automatically get into that program? I mean, how do they let the institution know they want to matriculate into one or the other after they graduate?
Currently, that's an advising function for a student who enrolls in the community college system to identify that as a destination. Ideally, we'd be able to build that into a platform that would allow a student to map degree programs between the two systems. That doesn't currently exist, but we have articulation agreements and pathway documents that describe for a student that this series of courses leads to that series of courses, allowing you to continue through to complete a bachelor's degree.
So if they're in that transition period, they basically are taking what their cognitive programs or the basic programs, so that when they matriculate into the other four-year institution, they basically are focused then on their major. Is that how that works?
It's probably going to be a little bit more complex and interwoven than that. For instance, a student who's interested in a bachelor's degree in accounting needs to be taking some accounting courses earlier than that. A student who's interested in a health sciences career, biological science career is going to be taking anatomy and physiology in the first 2 years. So there are going to be some prerequisite courses, some courses that align with the major, as well as some general education courses. You're welcome.
Representative Ford has a question, but I'd like to just sort of like transition to number 5 on our agenda. This is a report on the status of the implementation of measures that we put in effect in 1530. HB 1530, establishing curricular transfer pathways between the community college system in New Hampshire and the university system in New Hampshire, and ensuring that I can remember President Burks coming in and saying that we're working towards and anxious to accept or have a good working relationship with White Mountain Community College, where those 2 years though that they take at that level will come in and count towards. And we had the 30 different pathways and all that, and maybe those credits count as gen ed. But I'd like to really walk back into this, and I think Representative Ford has questions regarding this. And Wayne, I'd ask you to speak to that, and also Shannon and Mark. This is also, we're working here on the same topic. We got about a half hour left, so let's use this time for this purpose. Mark, Oliver, do you have a?
We seem to have been discussing traditional students throughout this conversation here, and I'm wondering if we might also consider non-traditional students, and it kind of segues into the other issue of transferring credits, community college credits, and so forth. So who'd ever like to take off with it, with
Sure.
what's happening there?
Sure. Mark, you okay if I'll take that and then start and then let you continue. So first of all, let's talk about non-traditional students, because I think a lot
I'm a
about
non-traditional student.
that I think that universities in general across the country have been way too focused on the 18 to 24-year-old. That is not a growth market. That is a market that's probably going to be steady but declining. At UNH, we've actually said that our growth is going to be at the graduate level and the non-traditional, non-credit and micro-credential market. That's where our growth is going to be. Don't look for UNH to be adding a lot more undergraduates. We're not going to. We'd like to keep the number that we have right now. I'd like to mix it with more in-state students. I'd like to increase the graduation rate, which is already really, really good, but that'll be the space that we're going to work in. In the micro-credential space, in the non-credit space, in that non-traditional space, and I will acknowledge that the GSC under Chancellor Rubinstein's leadership already has a very strong market there with students that are average age over 30, I believe. But in addition, we have over 20,000 New Hampshire residents took part in non-credit coursework at UNH last year. That number can't be overlooked. That's having an enormous impact, and it is generating revenue that helps to drive the university system. So I think it's very, very important. Coming back to HB 1530 and touching base on that, we very much appreciated the partnership and the instigation of that. As Chancellor Rubinstein said, we have many articulation agreements. In fact, we have 3 USNH campuses and 7 CCSNH campuses. So we have 21 articulation agreements for every degree program nearly. So we have hundreds and hundreds of them. What we need to do, and what this House Bill 1530 is going to help us to do, is to create some signature pathways that will work for all 7 community colleges, if possible, and all 3 system campuses. What we've done is we've set out to do that through a really good partnership. Leslie Barber in Chancellor Rubinstein's office and Kate Ziemer in my office are leading the charge, working between the 2 systems to look at all of the different degree pathways. Of the 600 students that Chancellor Rubinstein referred to, the vast majority of them cross over in 38 different degree programs. And we've now identified those 38. We've looked at where are there unique combinations, for example, in the North Country with Plymouth or between Great Bay Community Colleges and UNH. Some of them are unique, but all of them, if we can get the general education requirements lined up, plus clear articulation of if you are in a major, do you need that accounting course or do you need anatomy and physiology? Great example, Mark. And we're now trying to take that 38. We've identified the first 12 that we're going to be working through, and we hope to do that within the next year. In addition, this bill kicked off a partnership that, and I'll give Chancellor Rubinstein credit, that it was his idea that I reach out to Kristen Miller, who's a vice president for academic affairs, the kind of equivalent of a provost in the community colleges. They meet every month. All the community college provosts meet every month. And the system provosts, the USNH system provosts meet every month. Every other month, we're now meeting together. We're meeting as a team to have conversations, not just about 1530. In fact, for the most part, Leslie and Kate have been driving that, but instead to talk about how do we get faculty talking together? How do we make sure that the advising is smooth and that we are communicating that these pathways exist? So we're really quite excited. The 12 low-hanging fruit that have been identified so far by Kate and Leslie and their work include business administration is big, BA and BS across the 2, and education programs. So those 2 are going to be the tip of the spear. Nursing is actually one of the largest degree programs and probably has the most well-articulated pathways already. That's on there as well, just to let you know. And then the last thing I'll say is, working together, the provosts and the vice presidents for academic affairs are planning to report to our boards what we are doing. So at the end of June, the 7 community college provosts and the 3 community USNH provosts are all going to the USNH Board of Trustees meeting. We're all going to be there for Kate and Leslie to present an update to that board on what we're doing. And in July, we're doing the same thing. We're all going to go to the community college board and we're all going to present, because yes, it's important to get the pathways created. Yes, it's important that we have these clear articulations for our students so that it's very clear what path they can go on and that they can change after they matriculate. but it's even more important that we be working together so our faculty are talking to one another, so our advisors are talking together. And that, I think, is going to be that secondary success that's going to make everything work. Mark, what would you add?
If I can take a little license to also loop back to the previous question, just tie some things together. Start with early college, the dual and concurrent enrollment activity, and the question about whether it should take 4 years. Although there are examples of students actually finishing the associate degree in the time that it takes to complete high school, the typical student who's taking Running Start courses with us is taking 1 or 2 courses, maybe taking some advanced placement courses as well, but it's limited engagement at that point. So from the perspective of a student who would enroll at a 4-year institution, whether it's Plymouth or UNH or Keene, or whether it's, heaven forbid, Boston University, as a full-time student, they may take 12 or 15 or 18 credits a semester. The cost is no different, and so that student can make up the 1 or 2 courses they've taken through early college, and it sort of disappears. What we're hoping to do with the investment that the state has proposed for expanding dual and concurrent enrollment and tying it to 1530, we'd actually like to build structure to these pathways so that a student can take a meaningful set of courses, a coherent set of courses. So even beginning for students who are academically qualified as early as the sophomore year, but certainly in the junior and senior year, a student would have a semester or a year or more of college as the foundation. And we think it does 2 things. One, from an affordability perspective, that's a year less of tuition that they have to pay to any one of us, but it's also a year sooner to get to the labor market for students who have that ambition to begin to earn instead of paying into education. But the other thing we hope that we can do in structuring this well, we know that New Hampshire has a disproportionate share of college-bound students going to 4-year institutions out of state. We think that if we can build these pathways strongly enough, we can create an anchor that keeps more of those students in New Hampshire because they and their parents will see the value proposition. So part of what we're hoping to do is actually build structure, not just the courses and the structure of the pathways, but activities around the students who are enrolled in these courses, bring them to our campuses, help them see the opportunity to stay in New Hampshire. So affordability, the return on the investment for New Hampshire for those students and their families is significant. One of the questions that was asked earlier, but does this change the economics of the work we do? And absolutely it does in a couple of ways. Between the 2 systems, we'll no longer expect to see 2 years or 4 years of tuition from these students because we'll have done more with the early college activities. But one of the other things, the kinds of courses students are most likely to take while they're in Running Start or early college tend to be general education, liberal arts, business type courses. What's going to be left is an increasingly concentrated portfolio of classes, clinical classes, technical classes that are more expensive for us to offer without the ability to subsidize, if you will, with some of the larger enrolled general education type courses. So it will increase the reliance that we have on the state to sustain affordability for the state to continue to make investment in that work. The other piece that came up was the question about degrees versus alternative credentials. Again, it's a different way of thinking about the economics of post-secondary education. 2 or 4 years of tuition is a relatively steady revenue stream from students. Micro-credentials, among those 20,000, those could have been weekend classes, afternoon seminars, or something larger than that. But the revenue is not the same as credit courses, and right now the federal government doesn't treat them the same. So the availability of funding to support that is going to change the work that we do. Whether a student rushes directly to finish a 2 or 4 year degree maybe becomes less important. I think it was Governor of Pennsylvania who in his first day in office removed the requirement of a bachelor's degree for employment in the state of Pennsylvania. Others have done similar things. At a certain level, that degree becomes less important than the education that supports it and the specialized knowledge, whether it's in any particular technical field. What we really have to do better K through 12 or pre-K through 12, we've got to foster literacy and numeracy. We've got to strengthen students' critical thinking. We've got to foster a passion for learning that doesn't get extinguished by what they experience. Because ultimately, what we teach them in any class or in any program is going to have a limited shelf life. What people will need to learn 10 years from now, 20 years from now in the workforce is likely to be different. So we've got to rethink the way that our work as educators, it's not the 2 years or 4 years after high school. Even for those non-traditional students, it is going to be it's legitimately lifelong learning that responds to changes in technology, the economy, people's lives and circumstances. One of the interesting data points in New Hampshire Economic and Labor Market Information Bureau, 2030 projections for occupations, over 700 occupations listed. The projection is that the workforce will be 726,000 people employed here in New Hampshire. And it's not evenly distributed, 1,000 people in each of those 700 plus occupations. 58% of those 58% of the people expected to be employed will be in roles that don't require a specific degree, not graduate degree, not undergraduate degree, is going to require some type of learning that's unique to that responsibility, to that role. So again, as much as we focus on certain occupations, certain technical things, and there's no shortage, there's going to be a growth in the number of people who will need bachelor's degrees or associate degrees or doctoral degrees in certain fields, but they will still represent less than half of the people working in the state who will need some type of knowledge that they get from either on-the-job training or short-term training that prepares them to do what they need to do next. And we've got to be prepared to be responsive to those changes.
I'm assuming, thank you. I'm assuming that you're referring in large part to the badges and that whole group of courses that may or may not be developed around the badging system that a lot of industry seems to be moving toward.
I don't know that there'll be badges, and personal care assistant is going to be a steady demand as we age as a population. No specific badge that I know of, although someone may create one, but it probably will require a certain amount of knowledge, understanding of psychology, of behavior, of health. So again, you can turn it into a badge or a micro credential, but people will need to know what they need to know.
Yeah.
I would add that employers are parked in the same space. The demand for badges and micro-credentials is coming less from employers and more from the individuals that are doing the work to pick up those skills. When we partner through professional development and training, we partner with companies to deliver content to their employees, not to get a degree, not to get credit, but to get the skill. The employers want them to take it. They don't care how it gets curated. So I think that that's going to be something that the market is going to figure out over time. But it's coming from the people doing the work to take those additional trainings so they can put it on their resume in a manner that is understood.
One question I have for Mark, and it's also applicable, I think, to the four-year system. If I take a course at White Mountain, is that going to be received by another community college, one of the other 6 colleges, or are they going to, in their own department, say, that doesn't measure up to what we have as the criteria for that course? How's this working? The same type of issue for 4-year too.
So that's exactly the work that we've been undertaking, to have faculty across disciplines, across our system, take a look at the curriculum we offer in order to ensure that students don't run into barriers, that they will know that this course is applicable at other campuses across the system. So virtually anything you would anticipate comes in as a transfer course, but we're working to make it more seamless than that.
Historically, we've had a hard time just between Keene and Plymouth.
Yeah.
Much less the community college system, and there's no reason for it at all. It's completely unnecessary. It's built on the culture of where people are and what they're used to and their sense of, we know what's best for our students, and I appreciate that, and I value their expertise. But that is an impediment to what our students need. So we are now working across USNH, but also with CCSNH precisely so this stuff is clear and unambiguous and
So,
not a
so
problem.
Nate, if I'm applying to UNH and I've got the application where if UNH feels, or the university system says, you might be a good candidate for Keene or Plymouth, but you're not going to make it into UNH. So I go to UNH, to Plymouth or to Keene, I take a course or two and decide, I really want to move back into UNH where I first wanted to go. Are those courses that I now took at Plymouth or Keene going to transfer to you, Wayne, at the university?
Historically, the answer would have been, it's not up to Wayne, it's not up to me, it's up to the faculty in whatever department it was to make that decision, and that is not the way. No, I'm telling you the truth, and that is not acceptable. And so what we really need to do is say, and now we are in a place, and we want to be in a place across the state in higher education to say, absolutely no question.
When are we going to get there?
We're on the way.
So
In some places, we're already there. The question is, how do we do that more broadly?
yeah, that's, I wouldn't want you to come away thinking we're not there, because we are in many disciplines.
Yep.
Particularly in the professional disciplines, in the sciences, in engineering programs, in business. Those transfer really, really well. Where we have some of our biggest problems is actually in the liberal arts and the humanities. And we have to get those faculty to communicate with one another so that we don't have this isolationist tendency that has existed in higher education for decades, that is really the barrier we're pushing against.
Do you have a comment?
Walter Peterson and I worked on articulation agreements for years, and we thought we had the problem solved. Obviously, the beat goes on. But let me just say, the hours that we spent on that situation, talking to kids who couldn't get their credits transferred, it was a terrible problem then, and it's really, that's something that should have been taken care of years ago. You're all accredited. You go through an accreditation process that costs you a ton of money, right? Everybody gets the stamp of approval. It used to be from the New England board. Now it's, what, ITCHE?
NETCHE.
Now it's NETCHE. I went through it when I was president of a college. It's a real pain in the neck. But you all get it. And it seems to me, why isn't that the standard? If they get it, why aren't the credits transferable? And it's been a problem forever. And it's really got to be solved.
If it makes you feel any better, you were successful. The credits all transfer.
Oh, great.
The credits transfer.
That
Where
was
we
the
run into
context.
specific challenges, and this is true community college to USNH as well as between USNH institutions, is for some of the majors
Yeah, but
and for some of those specific courses.
good. Well, that's good to hear.
Representative Myler. Well, I don't know if we're all the way there, Senator. Representative Myler. Or Mark, you had a,
Let's say credits transfer, what we're working on now actually is to have grades transfer as well. We want this to be seamless to the point that a student can take the courses they need where they need them. And part of this, and it goes back to the non-traditional question and the 1530, right now, we have students across our system, roughly 25% of our instruction is occurring online, primarily through asynchronous online instruction, particularly for non-traditional students who are location bound. The ability to take advantage of a course that's offered at another campus or being offered in the semester they need it, in the format that they need it, shouldn't be a barrier to that student making progress. So again, we're trying to make full use of what's in 1530, not just thinking in terms of 2+2, but the language in that bill is optimizing the utility and affordability of the campuses. And for our non-traditional students who are location bound, both within the system and between the two systems, trying to find ways to make full use of that language to serve students.
Representative Myler.
This has been very instructive. I appreciate your talking about this. And you talk about the multiple ways you're serving students. But students equal economics to each institution. So with this multiple options of the micro certifications, going in, going out, competition between schools? Between, let's say, do I go to Plymouth? Do I go to Keene? Do I go to UNH? It all boils down to some economics. I mean, you've got your budgets you've got to deal with. So with the multiple approaches of students gaining their education or professional development opportunities with business, how do you manage that?
I think ultimately, we can't, each of us is a distinct institution with a distinct mission and strengths, but each of us cannot be everything to every student. And that's not responsible, that's not smart, it's not good for any of us. So what we're really committed to doing, and one of the reasons we're working as closely together as we are, so okay, so what do we do really well at Plymouth? What do our students need? How do we define our mission and articulate what we do really well? Make sure we're not stepping on anyone else's toes. Let them do, I'm not gonna compete with an R1. That doesn't make any sense for me. It's not gonna serve my students well. So Wayne and I are gonna work together to make sure we understand our spaces and our students and how we serve them. And ultimately, that's not, I mean, not every student belongs at Plymouth State and not every student belongs at UNH. And that's the work that we need to do together. Not every student needs to be in a 4-year degree. And that's why we have to be talking to each other.
But the Keene's music program can compete with UNH.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. And so somehow we've got, we've got to get this thing
Well,
squared away here.
We have just folded our bachelor's in music degree because we cannot compete with Keene and we don't want to. So we have a music ed degree that's very well used and highly productive and we leverage it and it's important for the North Country. We don't need a Bachelor of Musical Arts degree at Plymouth State and we've closed it down.
It's worth sharing. So first of all, I can't say thank you enough for the partnership that we have between the presidents, the 3 presidents at the 3 USNH institutions and the provosts at the 3 USNH institutions are all communicating constantly now. And we're making decisions collectively and we're changing policies collectively to try and make that a tighter integration. That was a great example, Nate, but it happens at UNH as well. I mean, our athletic training program at UNH, I shut down because it was higher rated at Plymouth. And so I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to partner with Plymouth because we still have some students that want to do that, but they can do that in partnership with a Plymouth degree. But we have to go further than that as we work together. We have to take a look at admissions because students don't know. We need to be totally comfortable with, and we have been, students that apply to UNH and don't get in are immediately made available to Keene and Plymouth. We have a wait list. As soon as we release the wait list, we release the wait list to Keene and Plymouth. We have partnership that says that, for example, at this time of year, what's going on right now, particularly this year in higher education, is hand-to-hand combat for students that are either undecided or on somebody else's wait lists. So we're having more institutions. So for example, the 6 New England flagships, every one of them went to their wait list this year. And their wait list is populated by students at other. So we're literally fighting over individual students. But Keene, Plymouth, and UNH made the strategic decision to share our lists. So if I have someone that we're going after that I know has already said yes to Plymouth, I'm not going after them. They're off limits. And I think those types of partnerships, those types of policies, and then the coordination of our curriculum is what we need to do in a state the size of New Hampshire in a demographic like we're looking at.
Representative Ford?
Thank you, and that sounds very encouraging to hear that. One concern that bothers me in particular, and I don't like to get into specific nitty-gritty, but this is general enough. A student presented a credential from another university and was asked for in addition to the credential itself, was asked for the curriculum of the course they took to ascertain whether or not the objectives of the course they were trying to transfer matched the objectives at another institution, which is not part of what I have always understood accreditation to be about.
Well, this is unfortunately, and you're absolutely right, and this is what I was referring to earlier, that we have to, and we are moving past. Historically, the control of what is taught is in control of the faculty, the substance. And what you're referring to is the syllabus of the
Yes.
course has to be approved by the department accepting the students. Now, I agree, that is not the right way to be doing it, but historically, and this is tied to accreditation because the ultimate academic decisions are made by the faculty and the faculty on the program. So this is a complicated, this is tied to accreditors, so we are accredited, but it's complex. So we're working on this and we've made lots and lots of progress to avoid exactly that circumstance.
Well, it would
Just to
seem
go-
to me that accreditation might be at risk.
Well, it depends on what you're talking about as accreditation. So there's university accreditation, which is NECHI, and then there's degree accreditation. So not knowing the details of this particular case, if a course is transferring in from, I'll pick on ABET, which is the engineering accreditor. We are accredited by ABET. If it's coming in from an ABET accredited institution, it should transfer. However, the same course might be taught at a non-ABET accredited institution, and therefore they would need to maintain our ABET certification, look at the syllabus.
What brought a particular twist to the individual I'm talking about was the course had been taken 11 years ago. And they were asking for the
That does
11
make it
years
a bit of
ago.
a different challenge.
And it was just sort of like,
That's a good, well, we're really at the time for closing this meeting down, and I want to thank you very much, all of you coming in from community college system and the university system. Is it possible that those reports, which you're going to be issuing to the trustees at the end of June and in July, a copy of that report could be issued to this committee so we could share it with all members on the committee here?
Absolutely. So what's going to be shared with the boards of trustees, I haven't seen it yet. We're actually meeting on the 12th to review it. Is going to be a slide deck. We will definitely share that. We were going to share the slide deck plus a written 2 or 3 page report with this body in August was our plan.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else from the committee right now? Once again, thank you very much. This has been an informative meeting, and I'm sure it opens up, room for further discussion.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What the group that's generating the civics report is part of it.
Yeah.
Supposedly they're going to do the work. They're going to create a committee. So, what I would offer an amendment to take the $1 million out, say that it's being done by this group.
Yeah, yes.
Let them do it.